Welcome back to another episode of Effortless Conversations. Our guest this week is Mark Gordon, CRO at Princeton Mortgage.
What's a CRO?
The way I understand it, it's a Chief Revenue Officer, right?
Perfect.
So tell me a little bit about that, Mark.
Yeah, so that's my fancy title for head of sales. But really, it should be more than that as we go forward in terms of looking for acquisition targets and maximizing, deliverables on our secondary marketing revenue, and making sure that we're signed up with the right vendors and partners to basically maximize the top line revenue of the organization. But really, most of the time, it's just like head of sales. Okay.
So I once I heard CRO, I naturally asked the question, what's the difference between a CRO and a CFO?
So totally different, right? So
okay.
A CFO
shows my ignorance. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, this is great. Well, I don't think most people know. And here's the thing, right? So like at most companies, the head of sales is like one of the most important people in the company, but there is no C-level title that's like, sometimes you see like chief sales officer, or like mortgage company you'll see chief production officer. And I, after a lot of back and forth and figuring out kind of what my strengths are and what I actually do here, I thought chief revenue officer made the most sense, and so did Rich, and so that's what we went with. But but a CFO is somebody, it's an accounting position, right? And so that person's job is really to be responsible for what your controller does, which is look backwards and count the beans and figure out if we made money or lost money and where it went. And then your CFO is really in charge of your forward projecting, look forward as to what profitabilities are going to be and what revenues are going to be, and then really try to make recommendations for opportunities to either avoid, it's a defensive position almost in terms of avoiding surprises, or being prepared for the next pandemic, and what that does to your finances and those types of things that a CFO would be looking to do. So it's really a projection-based accounting position. Chief Revenue Officer is very simply, I'm going out and figuring out what we're going to sell and how we can make the most money on it, and our strategy for marketing those products and selling those products and recruiting the people to do it, and building out the systems and strategies that our sales team is going to use, and really working on with the product team and the fulfillment team to make sure that they are giving us the things that we need to be able to go and sell that product. And so in a mortgage sense, very simply, it is figuring out what our strategy is for where we want to grow our team, where we want to bring on loan officers, how we can create an environment where those loan officers get better here than they would somewhere else. And the loan officers then becoming, and the brokers on our wholesale side, but loan officers and brokers, they're our customer, right? They're going out and finding customers. We need to create an environment where their customers are happy. But really, if loan officers are happy working here and brokers on our wholesale channel are happy working with us, then they're going to deliver customers to us. And so really, it's how do we attract those brokers and loan officers to come here, and how do we help them thrive once they do?
So you're really leading the Vanguard with sales, recruiting, all the major pillars of the company.
Yeah, for last year I was leading all recruiting. Now we have separated non-sales recruiting under people operations, and that's reporting into Rich as CEO, which is great because it allows me more time to focus on sales, recruiting, and development. But yeah, so it's recruiting loan officers, it's making sure that we have everything we need to attract the best loan officers, and then to make them raving fans once they're here. And then, one of the things I've noticed is that the happier your loan officers are, the more they're able to bring in production, because unhappy loan officers get unhappy because they're focused on doing things that are outside the job of production or prospecting, right? And so if they're worried about their loans closing, or they're worried about their marketing not working correctly, or if they're worried about whatever the answer is, that's less time they can go out and find new business. And so what we wanted to do is create a system where loan officers could spend a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a week doing nothing but prospecting, and then giving them amazing marketing support so that every one of the collisions they have in that prospecting is maximized through an automated process where we're staying in front of those prospects over time. And so that's kind of, that in our coaching program, which is supported by that entire process, is our unique value proposition to the loan officers that we're trying to recruit.
And this is the Princeton selling system you're speaking of, right?
Yeah, it's the Princeton selling system, which is an amalgamation of the stuff that we stole from the people we admire the most, right? And
totally fair.
Yeah, no, that's one of the reasons I came to Princeton. I've kind of told this story a couple of times, but I had learned a lot of lessons through pain, $1 million mistakes that I've made over the course of my career, having my own business, running my own branches, doing those different types of things. When I met Rich, he had some really awesome life experience, Goldman Sachs, shopping centers, investments, and different things like that, but none really on the mortgage side. But he had read everything there was to read, and he had read, not just in the mortgage industry, but business books and sales books. And so I'd be like, here's what I think, and he'd be like, oh yeah, here are the 4 theories, or the and these other companies that do this thing. And I was like, and he was younger than me, and I thought that was just amazing. And so, I had my own business for a long time. I didn't expect to ever be working for anyone again. But I realized immediately when I met Rich, I was like, oh, this is what I need to make me better. The things that I've avoided in my career, where it was like, I used to sort of like make fun of people who learn everything from reading books. I'm like, you got to get out there and do it. And yes, that's true also. But since I came to Princeton, I've probably read about a book a week, maybe slightly less than that. And it's transformed my ability not only to continue to build on my ideas, but then also be able to communicate those ideas to somebody else, where it's not just like, hey, this is the theory of Mark. It's like, no, like, here are the people who did this the best, and here's them explaining it in a way that sometimes is better than the way I can explain it. And so, that's essentially my job here, right? Is to marry those different things and work cross-functionally to make sure our loan officers are happy. Yeah,
that's something that I've noticed since coming to Princeton is the executive team is very adamant about sharing their knowledge that they've read. Like, the marketing team, the marketing team is reading Creativity Inc. right now, which I know you recently read. But it's so nice to be able to have all of us kind of on the same page, reading the same ideas and being able to build off of those as well.
Yeah, I think that book's a perfect example, right? So if Courtney comes in here and she's like, we should do this thing, you're like, cool, Courtney, like, that makes sense, and I know that I have a lot of respect for you, but like, maybe there's a part of it that you just intrinsically don't like. And so you're like, you get dismissive of that thing because we're humans and we want to think that we know, or we've had our own experience with it, or maybe it doesn't work for you in a way that feels good in that moment. So that happens, that's human nature. But if Courtney's like, hey, read this book, Creativity Inc. This is the story of Pixar, and this is how they outperformed 10x everyone else who was trying to do the thing they were doing. And they took Disney, Disney was struggling, and they crushed the creative process to the point where Disney just kind of quit and gave up and said, okay, we'll buy you. And Steve Jobs was attracted to these guys and was involved around at Pixar. And you're like, and then you read about it and it's like, okay, here, and it's not like they came out of the gates with that. It was like, here is the 20-year journey we went on to figure out the best way to do these different things, and here's what worked, and here's what didn't, and here's how, here it is in this form that you can take and use for your own stuff. It's like, okay, cool, now it's not just like Courtney's thing, it's like, Courtney's saying it's worked for her, I can see it working here, this worked for these guys, it marries the thing I learned also from Ray Dalio's book, Principles, and now it's like, okay, it's very easy to get your team bought in on a vision, right? And everybody's coming to that table now with their own interpretation of what they read in Creativity Inc. or what they took from Principles, and so the more power of everybody having that information to share is going to lead to better outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I just blanked out there toward the end. I'm not going to be able to go raw.
No, it's cool. Listen, we're, it's, I get going and I can't stop.
No, I like it, dude. I get caught up listening to you. You're such an interesting guy. You're obviously very educated. You've read a lot of books, and you say that a lot of that started when you met Rich because he had read so much, and you weren't really a reader before that, right?
No, I mean, the only books I really read before coming here, I read the Jim Collins books, which is, by the way, they've been foundational for me here as well, but I think I was in an airport and I saw this and they were like, you should read this book or whatever. So like I read like Good to Great, and like that was huge for me because through the use of stories about companies that I knew a little bit about, they were able to kind of differentiate what made certain companies good versus great companies, or a great CEO versus a bad CEO, and some of the other books in there. And so I was really attracted to those books, but it was hard for me to find time to do it. That's at least the story I'm telling myself is, I thrust myself into the CEO role because I was able to raise money to build a company before I was ready, and I didn't have access to mentors. One of the things that, Rich was telling some stories last week, and he was like, I learned this from this person, learned from this one. And I was like, that is amazing to have those people in your life. I didn't have that, right? Like my parents were successful, but in their own lanes. They were accountants, and they, had done they met at Goldman Sachs, and they, my dad had a very small company of 5, 6, 7 people, but like hadn't done anything on this scope, and I just wasn't exposed to people early in my career that were interested in mentoring or doing those different things. And so I kind of went about it on my own, and I didn't read, didn't get exposed to those things. And so, but yeah, so I read those Jim Collins books, and that was amazing, but I kind of never really kept pursuing it, and didn't really make it a fun foundation of what we were doing there. And so yeah, when I came here and I realized that Rich had such a head start on me, even though he was younger, had done less work stuff, But he had read all these books and talked about how he had met a guy who was like, you should read one book a week. And he's like, that changed my life. And I was like, I can read one book a week. And so at some point, it's just deciding to do the things that you know are the right things.
Right. And one thing I've noticed a lot about these books that speak about, like Creativity Inc., like management styles and stuff. One thing that I found fascinating about Ed Catmull was how he was constantly surveying the environment around him and how he personally affected that environment and what he could do differently to make it better. And there was so much introspection on Ed Catmull's side. Do you have moments like that where you're looking at Princeton, you're thinking, all right, I need to change some things about what I'm doing to make everybody else change what they're doing? You hold weekly sales trainings and you talk about what to do, in your personal life to make your professional life more copacetic and everything. Do you have a lot of moments like that every week where you sit back and like, this is what I'm going to do this week. I'm going to make this change and see how this affects people?
Not to get like weird about it, but like I would say it's not even moments. It's a constant state of being.
Right.
And what I mean by that is whether it's my personal life, my professional life, or every interaction. At some point along the way over the last few years, it became I finally accepted the fact that I couldn't change anyone else, which is actually the most freeing thing in the world. It's sort of like that player versus victim mindset we talk about here all the time. It's like when you're full player, it's like this complete acceptance of like, I cannot change how people experience me, right? So like, someone give me feedback that I thought was wrong, and I immediately be like arguing with them, like, no, you're missing it. Like, that's not what I mean. I mean this thing. It's like, it doesn't matter what I meant, right? Like, the answer is, it matters maybe if I need to hash something out in this moment, but I would do this thing where I would like try to convince the world it should interpret me this way. It's like, that's not how it works, right? And so it very much becomes, okay, what can I change about myself so that the world interprets me the way that I want them to? Right, and then that becomes about doing deep work on yourself and therapy and coaching and conscious leadership training, of which I spend at least 2 to 3 hours a week outside of meditation time on personal development, trying to become the leader that's capable of getting us to 50,000 loans a year. And so, I think, I'll give it a quick story.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I apologize, I get excited.
No, I like stories. Go ahead.
So there's an employee at Princeton Mortgage who I think is super high potential, but for some reason is not as ambitious as I would like for him to be. And I was talking about some of these books, and he's like, I just find those books so painful. And I'm like, I'm like, what do you mean? Like, these are books about like what we're doing here. And he's like, I had trouble reading them. And I remembered I'm reading this book right now called The Great Game of Business. And one of the things the guy writing that book said is, he's like, the whole point of that book is to teach everyone in the plant, because it's a manufacturing plant, about the actual business and how they make money and how it all works. Because if everybody understands that stuff and then you kind of gamify it, it leads to much better outcomes. But he says one of the real problems is that people aren't interested in business. And I was like, how could people not be interested in business? And then I had that conversation with this employee, and I said to myself, I'm actually not even that interested in business. What I'm fascinated by is human behavior. And so I've always been fascinated by human behavior. I remember, being in middle school and like having a girlfriend of mine be upset about her relationship and call me on the phone. And I just would be so interested in what was going on in their head. I just wanted to understand like what was going on with people. And I wanted to really get a handle on that. And then I became a psychology major in college, because again, I just wanted more introspection into human behavior and why we are who we are, and how much or little control we have over in the moment how we behave, but we have a ton of control over time of what we expose ourselves to, right? And so then it becomes this mission to, what can I expose myself to? What books can I read? What people can I be around? What information can I kind of the software I can get into my brain? The hardware is here, right? The hardware is in, but what software can I download to that I'll respond in better ways and have better outcomes? And so, so the answer is constantly that I am looking to alter my behavior. Having said that, I'm still bad at it a lot of the time. I still get very caught up in my things of right and wrong. And I had an instance where I met somebody new this weekend in a social situation, and like she said something, and like I kind of went at her a little, and then I see that she gets upset, and I didn't want to make her upset, but there's just another thing that like I was like, that's not right, and then I get like into my like self-righteous mode and had a couple drinks in me, and and then all of a sudden I could see her, she getting really upset. I was like, what, I'm so sorry. I was like, but I had this moment like, why am I even doing this? What am I trying to win here? And so, tons of self-reflection.
Yeah, I feel like that's so important to success in business, and it's something that I'm obviously new to in the corporate world. But I've taken time for self-reflection. But I noticed reading in these books and watching you guys that you really do. It embodies the player mindset, because when you're the victim, you're thinking everything else outside of me is affecting me. When you're the player, you're thinking I'm affecting everything outside of me. And I can see that, when you come in, and I can tell that you're keyed into a lot, your LOs and your sales team, and you kind of know what's going on, and you know the right buttons to hit when you're doing your weekly sales training and, giving advice. And do you find yourself reminding yourself when you're giving advice to take your own advice,
Well, the best way to learn and to become better is to teach.
Yeah.
Right? And so I've been very grateful for the fact that I've had the opportunity to spend most of my career teaching and coaching, and it's the work that I'm most attracted to. I love helping people get through different things. And so, finding different ways to tell the story that resonate with different people. If you're talking to 20 people, you can tell that same piece of information 6 different ways, and it will resonate with a different 3 or 4 people in the room every single time. One of the things I always say to, in my player or victim conversations, this is like a framework that just kind of appeared to me one day. It was like, listen, I was like, everybody is surrounded by good and bad things happening around them all the time, but it's like kind of invisible at first. But if you're looking for bad stuff, you will only see all the bad stuff happening around you. And if you're looking for good stuff, you will only see all the good stuff happening around you. And so it's like, cool, well, what can I do to make me feel like I'm in a better place? It's like to see the good stuff. And we see that throughout human history. We see people in the worst possible situations, in the worst of humanity, finding the good in it. And we see people who have everything and are constantly focused on the bad of it. And so it's not about what's happening to us. It's about how we interact with what's happening to us and how we perceive it, and the software, right? What we expose ourselves to, and the thoughts that we have, and the time we take to reflect on it, that changes our human experience, and it changes how the rest of people experience us. And so when I think about what my overall goal, my overarching goal is, I want to have a positive impact over the course of my life on as many people as possible, right? I want at my funeral, I want there'd be a lot of people there to say, Mark, help me get to where I wanted to go. Well, if that's really the ethos you live by, you gotta become a person that's capable of doing that. And so that focuses my decision making, in a really strong way as well, that provides clarity,
Right. Do you think that so you said that your parents were accountants, right?
They were.
And then you were a psychology major.
Yes.
So I'm curious what your plan was when you were joining as a psychology major. Were you planning to go into the mortgage industry, or what were you thinking?
So a couple of things. One is my dad had a small accounting business, and he was successful, and the easiest thing in the world. We were middle class, but it was when I was in college and fearful I'd ever be able to provide for my family. Like, I was like, cool, maybe I'll try this accounting thing. And I took one accounting class at Albright College, and it was 9 to 11 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the teacher, it was English as a second language for her. The material was bad for me, and I nearly failed out before I dropped the class. And I was like, okay, cool, accounting's not the path. So, which I kind of knew, but I went to college for psychology because honestly, the work, I'm one of those people. I'm not a visionary. The ideas don't come to me. I have to see it somewhere first. And so, as I mentioned before, the people I was most attracted to, honestly, in middle school and high school were the ones who would talk about their feelings. And so then I ended up dealing with people who went to the school psychologist, or a different experience with this person or that person. And I remember thinking I could be a really great school psychologist. That was the person I'd been in contact with who I thought was having the most positive impact on the most amount of people. So I was like, that's what I wanted to go be. I also knew that I wanted to make a bunch of money, and so I didn't have that all figured out, but I said, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to study how people think, and whatever I end up doing, that will kind of lead to itself. But I did learn over college. I wasn't going to go get my master's or my PhD. I did not thrive in a school environment. I knew I did better working. And so I came from school. I was sitting on the couch. And the first day, my dad looked at me when he came home. He didn't say anything. And the second day, he said, if you're on that couch again tomorrow, I'm kicking you out. He's like, go get a job. I said, well, what does this do? He's like, well, I have some clients like you, and they're in sales. He's like, and they do really well. You should try sales. So I went on Monster.com at the time, which was 2004, and I put my resume up there, and immediately had all these entry-level sales positions calling me up, and started out in insurance and kind of took it from there. A year after the insurance thing, I went looking for something different. Found the mortgage industry. It was a call center, and everyone looked super happy and was doing super well, and I thought I could do that, and so the rest is history.
And so you did the call center for a while, and you started your own business.
So I did the call center from 2005 to 2008, and then the world ended, and in June of '08,
Right.
that company fell apart. And I had a couple different choices. I could go to like a smaller company that some of those guys offshot to, or I could find something completely different to do. Or at the time I had my girlfriend and my friend Brett, and we were like, hey, we think we can do this, right? And so at the time it was like, cool, do we go start our own mortgage company, or do we become a branch of another mortgage company? At the time, we didn't know enough to do our own thing. We were like 25 years old. So we became a branch of a company called First Metropolitan Mortgage. Right away, we were doing better. Everybody else was kind of mourning over spilt milk, and we were desperate and trying to, pave our way during this very difficult time. I mean, we actually opened August 8th of 2008, and it was Thanksgiving of '08 that the world, officially at the end kind of fell apart. But we did that for 3 years, and then that company went out of business because mortgage companies were doing that a lot around that time. And then it was like, okay, cool. We've kind of attached our cart to somebody else's horse enough. And so at that point, I went out and started raising money, and we started our own company in 2012, I guess, and then did that for 5 years and sold that in 2017 or 16, I guess. Stayed on the year that we had to as part of the contract of selling that, and then my plan was to move to Charleston, have an easier life, but I met Rich on the way. So.
All right. Had you been to Charleston before, or you just?
Yeah, we came here about 2 years early. 2 years before that on vacation. Nicole was actually pregnant with our second kid at the time, and we brought our friend who was our nanny and also my daughter down, and we came down for 4 or 5 days, and we just fell in love. I knew I really liked it here, but at the time we still had the business in New Jersey, and all of our friends and family there, and a lot of our friends and family worked for us in our business in New Jersey, and so we were kind of stuck there. But then once we sold that and kind of that wasn't the right fit, it was like, okay, we're going to start over. It was like, well, why would we do it there, And then we planned on maybe retiring to Charleston, but it was like, let's do it now.
Yeah. And so you talk about, you had the one mortgage company go under, and then another one during the financial crisis. And when these moments happened to you in your career, was there a moment where you were like, I'm done with the mortgage industry, I'm going to go do something else? Or were you always kind of like, all right, this happened, I'm going to keep moving forward, I'm going to find the next thing? Or
man, I'm not wired like everybody else. I'm not wired for fear, and I'm not wired for stopping. And so it was like June of '08 when when our company was finally like, hey, we're going under, basically. And so that was like on a. Actually, so it was Rocco Mediae was playing Tiger Woods in a playoff on a Monday because they had been a tiebreaker or whatever, and we went home for lunch to watch the end of I guess it was the U.S. Open tiebreaker or whatever. I think it was the U.S. Open, and probably right around now actually. This is actually probably all happened in 2008 this month. So it's 13 years ago.
13 years, yeah.
And me, Brett, and Nicole, we went and watched the tournament. We came back to work, and they called us into a meeting, and they were like, so we just let everybody know while you guys were at lunch that we're shutting down. We had missed the big meeting. It was really funny. And then the next day, I had gone online, done the research for a branch manager thing, put a full business plan together, had submitted it, had talked to 2 recruiters, different companies, had it all approved, and we were headed down to Charlotte. I mean, it was like I was just ready, as weird as that sounds. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm just wired that once I'm in something, I'm in it until it's not fun for me anymore. But I'll tell you, the fun part to me is the trying to do hard stuff. When the one time my career wasn't having fun is when I worked for somebody that made me ask for permission every time I had to do something, which is one of the wonderful things I think worrying about Princeton is if you have the initiative, you can go. If you see white space, take it. And so I'm having a blast now. I was having a blast then. Even as it was failing, there were some dark times where I was worried about my employees getting paid. Especially when those companies went under. It's like, do we have enough money to pay payroll? And one company did. The first company I worked for did it right. The second company didn't, and we had a 2-year bankruptcy thing I had to work to get people paid on. But eventually they got theirs as well. But other than that, it was just part of the journey.
Right. Yeah. And so living through the financial crisis in 2008 in the financial industry, and then how does that compare to what we went through last year with COVID? Was it a wildly different scenario, or was it, similar and you kind of knew how to navigate it because you've been through something before like that, or?
I would say it was very different from an outside perspective, and from an inside perspective, it's almost hard for me to even know because I knew so little then and I know so much now that my perspective on it is very different, and the amount of control, like, not that I had a victim mindset about it then, but the answer was like, I don't even understand this. I just know I need to go get another job. You know, like I need to like figure out how to. If I had understood what was going on in 2008, I probably would have done what a lot of other people did and gotten out. But for me, I was like, I'm just going to swim upstream and hard. And so that was a really good lesson for me. But you know, with COVID, it was scary in how unknown things were, and there were a couple of dark months for the mortgage industry where like we really didn't know what was going to happen. You didn't even know you're going to be able to close a loan. But I will say this, that like, you know, leave it to, you know, Americans and even human beings just in general to like find a way. And so after those first couple of months, it was like, okay, cool, like this is our new reality, let's do it. And, you know, our company, I think, was uniquely set up to be able to do the work from home thing to begin with. We were already kind of spread out, and we never really missed a beat. So I will say this, that like in all those scenarios, there's like a survival instinct that kicks in, which is like, I gotta find a way to make this happen. So that feeling was similar, but from a perspective situation, you know, it was those instincts kick in, and I don't remember thinking about how it felt a lot of the time. I remember feeling, you know, I loved where I worked in 2008. That first mortgage company I had, like I would have stayed there for the rest of my life, and I still have such a fondness in my heart for the people that work there. And so it was devastating. You know, you had this place where everybody was in their 20s, and we were all working hard together and playing hard together, and we had beach houses together, and we were like doing all this stuff, and like I was living. You know, the first time in my life I had money. It was this amazing thing. I met my wife there, and so that was really sad on the relationship side of it. But from like a work perspective, it was like, cool, next thing up, you know, new opportunity. And, you know, when people talk to me about like retirement now or this age, you know, or like whatever, you know, the answer was like, I was talking to Rich earlier today, and we were talking about how there's another company in the industry that like had a bunch of executives that were like in their last 5 or 10 years, and they were talking about like coasting through the end. The company recently went public. And I was like, I don't think I could do that. And Rich's like, well, you know, you're not at that stage of your life. Maybe you would. He's like, I can't see myself doing that either, but you never know. And I'm like, all I could think about is, if I hit that point where like I couldn't see what I was fighting for anymore, then I would just go fight a different fight. It's not about the money or anything else. Like, I love the fight. You know what I mean? And so if you take the fight out of me, and I had this happen when my company was acquired. I was still making really good money for the year I was there. I was miserable because I couldn't get to the next thing I wanted to do. There was just no one would let us run. You know what I mean? You had to get permission for everything. I love the fight. I love to run. I love to do all that stuff. That's what energizes me.
Yeah, you don't strike me as a person who would be looking forward to retirement.
No. I mean, I might be looking forward to a day where at some point I get to do something completely new. But like, you know, yeah, if at 20 years from now we've done everything we wanted to do here, like I'll go fight a different fight, but that would be so exciting, right? Like maybe I'll go coach high school football and see how good that. Like that, who knows? You know, But the challenge of doing something amazing and getting to positively impact people in a way that helps them achieve greatness is. I mean, the Olympics are coming up. I find myself watching this weekend. I'm like so inspired by these people who spend their whole lives working so hard for something. And so yeah, that's always kind of been what I was all about, even though I was never quite good enough to be an Olympian or even close.
Well, most of us aren't.
Yeah.
I could see you being a football coach. I had some coaches in my time that will stay with me forever with the good advice they gave me, and I still think about them sometimes. I'm like, oh, well, what would Coach Harden say to this? You know, what would he think about me sitting here and taking this and not stepping up and fighting back? Or
yeah, I mean, listen, leading young people, especially in group collective efforts like team sports. It's hard to think of work where there's a bigger permanent impact on people. You know, the people that my coaches, like, I can still hear them. You know what I mean? I can still hear things. I can still remember the way they made me feel on a certain day at a certain time, whether it was good or bad or otherwise. Those experiences shape you. You know, and so yeah, I'm always looking for more opportunities like that.
So speaking of like shaping people that you're dealing with, I want to talk to you a little about the Princeton culture, because we here at Princeton, you know, it's all about culture. This is, you know, freedom and responsibility. You know, tell me a little bit about the Princeton culture that you guys sell here.
You know, it's we sell. It's what we live by, right?
Yeah, right.
So culture is usually sold. Here, it's what we hire to, what we fire to, what we promote to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, the freedom and responsibility is that makes like a really good headline, but I actually think it sells so much of it short. You know, I find that it is the thing that when I say it's the thing I get the most reaction. I'm like, oh, freedom and responsibility, it sounds awesome. It's like, it sounds awesome when somebody else has freedom and responsibility, but people like the freedom part and sometimes they don't love the responsibility part. But what it really comes down to is this. We are a group of people on an adventure together to try to do something great. And then in order to do something great, we decided that there were these rules that other companies that do great things followed, that made sense to us and were core to our ethos and who we are, which is, there's a plan to do something amazing and do it as a group of people, that we all at the very beginning, I should say, decided that we were going to live by. And then the cost of being part of our cool thing that we're doing in this adventure is to follow our rules. And so that was not very controversial. It hasn't been for the last 3 years, but I will say this, it's very hard to have perspective on, because other people come here. For instance, we had our quarterly planning meeting, and because of COVID, we hadn't had one in a year and a half in person. So there's people that have been with the company for a while, even in important jobs, that had not even met anybody else, hadn't been in the room, hadn't seen Rich do the Rich show yet, and doing those different things. And and I was surprised by how impacted they were. People that never talk about how inspired they are, but they're like, that was amazing, I'm so excited at this or this or this, and really spent the whole first day and a half going over the culture, right, and kind of what that was. And to me, I live it and I know it and I teach it to all the new hires that come into the company, but they were like experiencing it as like a thing in person for the first time. And they were so inspired by it, because the answer is that if you commit yourself to a set of rules that everybody else has committed themselves to, and those rules include things like radical candor and radical transparency and being the CEO of your life and work, and the limitless opportunity that comes with those things, it starts to feel like you're in a really safe place, because now everybody's behaving the same way and you understand the rules of the game. And there's safety, by the way, not in the results, because we are a results-based organization, and you have to deliver results to stay in our game. But the rest of it feels safe, because everybody knows what other people are thinking about them, and you've shared what you're thinking about everybody else and what you're thinking about the different topics, and it's all out there. And so there's no more managing perceptions. There's no more, is this person on my team, or is this person here, this person there? Like, intrinsically in that room, we are all on a journey to do something great. We have an abundance mindset about it. We all need to do whatever we can to help the other people towards winning our game. We set our goals that way as a collective, and so that safety that comes with that allows people to do work that's the best work of their lives. And so when we think about what does it mean to create an environment motivated people can thrive, it is create a place where people do the best work of their lives. And it's hard and it's taxing and you're doing something meaningful, but like whether someone's at Princeton for 3 years or 30 years, we want them to look back at the period they were here and say, that was the best work I ever did. Those are the best people I ever worked with. And if we can kind of make that a repeatable process by having our culture and our rules, I think there's a pretty good chance we'll be very successful.
Yeah, the transparency here and the radical candor, like you mentioned, it's new to me coming from the film industry, where you have these different departments all working on the same show, but you don't divulge any information. It's kind of like everybody's kind of out for themselves. It's a strange working environment. And so I can say that, since I've come here and I've been dealing with, being transparent and receiving feedback, and I feel like I've pushed myself harder here than I have before. And that's because, I got comfortable in the film industry. I knew what I was doing. I didn't really have to show up and put a lot of effort into it every day. And this has been different. This has been really cool. And a lot of it, the feedback and the transparency and knowing exactly where I stand has really helped me grow and be like, all right, I got to light a fire under myself and really get working. It is results based, but it does feel like you're part of a team that's moving forward. And I can really feel like like you said, a lot of places sell culture, but I can tell we really live it here.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you I'm motivated by fear, and I used to tell the story of if I don't get better, somebody else will come take my job. But the reality is it's not actually where my thoughts go and what motivates me. My responsibility to everybody else who works here and their families and their ability to take care of their families, that is a very motivating thing for me. I love the idea that I can have a positive impact on the size of the bonus that we get to give out to people that can change what they're able to do with their children, and how they're able to take care of their families, and so that is super motivating, and that's the cult. And again, it's not a family, right? It's a professional sports team, right? And so we talk about that a lot too, because there's a cost. The family is forever, and you don't get to choose it. Sports teams get chosen, and they're not forever intrinsically, right? But being part of an amazing team that accomplished something great is something that people come back and celebrate together for the rest of their lives, right? 50 years after so and so won the Super Bowl, the team will come back and celebrate, right? So that's what we're going for.
Yeah. And it's nice because, a lot of places you don't have leadership where they're more focused on their employees and the people that they're working with. It's more, what's the bottom line. So it is refreshing to have, leadership that is so invested in their employees' lives. It's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're playing a game where the bottom line is the scoreboard.
Right.
But what do we know, right? If everybody on a basketball team is looking out to score the most points, the team loses. Right? If everybody on a basketball team cares about the other people on that team and wants everybody else to succeed, and the goal is to create an environment where everybody in the team becomes the best player they can be, and that's where the focus is, then the winning takes care of itself. And so that's the chosen focus for us.
Right. Well, it's nice to see it not only spoken but lived out too.
Appreciate that.
So there's a question that I always ask on these podcasts, and it's usually an icebreaker, but I wanted to go ahead and ask it because I feel like you're probably going to run with it. But and I think I know the answer, but I want to hear what you'll say. But Mark, what's your favorite movie and why?
So that's your icebreaker question?
That's my icebreaker. Get to know you a little bit.
It's funny, when I used to do group interviews, I used to bring people in, I used to ask them what's the movie they've seen the most times, and that I thought was a good icebreaker because people had some strange answers.
That's a good one.
But which my most times movie is Top Gun.
Oh, of course.
I've seen that a lot. But it's not my favorite. If I had to pick my favorite movie ever, and it's funny, people like this movie, but I don't hear anybody else talk about it as their favorite, is Gladiator. And there's a couple reasons for that, but I love the struggle, right? I love an overall commitment to excellence in everything that you do, that you see in Maximus. And I also love, I think Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal of Commodus is like one of the great acting performances of all time, because you see this person he also wants to be great so badly wants to be great, and he's putting all of the work into it, and he's coming at it in all of the wrong ways, from all of the wrong places, for all of the wrong reasons, and you see how that pollutes him and his path and leads to him becoming one person, versus Maximus, who's doing it the right way and is doing it as a leader of people and bringing people together and cares about his team. He ends up, achieving greatness, right? Coming from nothing, he achieves greatness. Whereas Commodus has been giving everything and can never get there. He can't even get his own father's love, right? And so that dichotomy of like, hey, this is the right way, this is the wrong way to live, and that leads to better outcomes. I think it kind of, I'm not saying the first time I saw the movie I thought it through that way, but I knew I was attracted to it that way, and in the 50 or so times I've probably seen it since, that's kind of what I've come to.
I knew you'd have a great answer for that. I also love Gladiator. I don't remember the first time I saw a lot of movies, but I clearly still remember sitting in that theater and watching Gladiator, especially when he swings the two swords and chops the guy. I was a kid, and I was like, oh my God. But I knew that you'd have a great answer for that, and you did. You exceeded my expectations for your answer.
Nice, I'll take it. So.
But guys, Mark, I've really enjoyed speaking with you. This has been an awesome episode.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man. Let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it.
Cool. Thanks for joining us this week on Effortless Conversations, and we'll have another guest next week.